The fluorescent lights buzz overhead like insects trapped in plastic. Sacred Heart's recovery ward smells like antiseptic and desperation, that particular blend of bleach and human suffering that never quite washes out of scrubs no matter how many times you run them. Danielle Ross moves between beds with the efficiency of someone who has learned that invisibility is survival. Probationary status. 6 months in, and every action is catalogued, every mistake a potential termination notice. She doesn't flinch when patients call her by the wrong name. She doesn't correct them. She simply adjusts their pillows, checks their vitals, and moves to the next room. The 4-stand-beside room for 12 needs restocking. She reaches for the cabinet with her right hand, her left side stiff from the surgery, the one that reshaped her body and ended her career in ways the discharge papers never quite described. A scar traces her ribs where shrapnel from Marjah tore through Kevlar and flesh alike. She touches the dog tag around her neck, the habit surfaces when she's stressed, and pulls her hand away quickly. Nobody can see that. Nobody can know. The other nurses talk at the station. Sarah mentions a date. Jennifer complains about the staffing shortage. Danielle restocks supply carts alone, her movements precise, economical. The kind of efficiency that comes from training, not temperament. She's learned to make herself small in crowded rooms. To speak only when spoken to. To nod and smile and keep her history locked in a box beside her late husband's folded flag, hidden in a closet at home that no one will ever see. Dr. Ashford watches her from the hallway. She doesn't notice at first. She's concentrating on the 4-line for Mrs. Chen in room 407, her hand steady as a surgical laser as she finds the vein on the first attempt. A 20-gauge catheter slides in without resistance. The flush runs clear. Perfect. She started 17 fours this shift without a single miss, but no one remarks on it. That's the trade-off of probation. Excellence is expected. Mistakes are career-ending. It's 4:33 p.m. when she reaches for the supply closet on the 3rd floor. The one between the recovery ward and the post-op corridor, the narrow one where the pharmaceutical stock gets kept. She needs 500 milliliter saline bags. Standard restocking. Routine. She opens the cabinet door and freezes. Dr. Ashford stands inside. His briefcase lies open across the shelf, pharmaceutical bottles arranged like chess pieces. Post-operative fentanyl. The high-grade stuff. He's transferring liquid from the hospital stock bottles into unmarked vials, his hand steady, his expression focused. A $12,000 Rolex gleams on his wrist as he works. Their eyes meet. 1 second. 2 seconds. The fluorescent light above them flickers once. He closes the briefcase slowly. Deliberately. The gesture isn't panicked. It's controlled. Dangerous. You didn't see this, he says. His voice is silk over steel, the kind of voice that has authority woven into every syllable. Danielle backs out of the closet without speaking. Her hand trembles on the door handle, the only tell she allows herself. But it's enough. He sees it. He files it away like data. He follows her into the hallway. The recovery ward is 40 feet away. Nurses are visible at the station if she walks that direction. He steps closer, invading her space with the casual arrogance of a man who has never learned that his presence should fill people with anything but comfort. You're still on probation, Nurse Ross. He says her name like it's a joke. That makes you extremely replaceable. She doesn't respond. The words sit in the air between them like a physical weight. He's not threatening her explicitly. That's the brilliance of it. He's simply stating facts. Facts that both of them know are true. She has no seniority. No permanent contract. No union protection. One phone call to HR and she's gone. Back to looking for work. Back to explaining the gap in her employment. Back to being invisible, but without a paycheck. Do you understand what I'm saying? His eyes are cold as January. The kind of cold that comes from the absolute certainty that the world bends to his will. Yes, Doctor. Her voice is flat. Neutral. The voice of someone who has learned to keep herself locked down so tightly that nothing escapes. No emotion. No history. No truth. Good. He steps back, and the distance between them feels suddenly vast. I'd hate to see you lose this opportunity. You seem dedicated. He walks past her toward the elevator. She stands in the hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs, her hand still trembling. The dog tag beneath her scrubs feels impossibly heavy. She touches it again, then forces her hand back down. That night, she restocks the medication carts. That night, she charts vitals and adjusts fours and answers call lights. That night, she does the work that keeps people alive while they sleep, and no one knows that the woman in the starched scrubs once held the rank of Major. No one knows that her hands have applied tourniquets in the dark. No one knows that she's seen things that would rewire most people's entire understanding of what the human body can endure. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead. The machines beep their steady rhythm. The night shift stretches ahead of her like a road with no visible end. And somewhere in the hospital, Dr. Ashford walks with his briefcase, knowing that he has leverage. Knowing that she saw. Knowing that she'll stay quiet because staying quiet is the only way she survives here. But that wasn't the only thing he didn't know. He didn't know that the trembling in her hands wasn't fear. It was something else entirely. Something that had been trained out of her over 17 years. Something that lived in the space between restraint and rage. He didn't know that the quiet nurse in the starched scrubs had once held a radio in her ear while 140mm mortars walked across a phi base near Helmand Province. He didn't know that the scar on her left side came from an IED that killed 3 soldiers standing closer to her than he was standing right now. He knew she was replaceable. He didn't know what she was. 3 weeks pass in silence. Danielle works double shifts, her hand steady on 4 lines and wound dressings, her voice professionally neutral when she reports to the day charge nurse. Ashford avoids her directly now, no more supply closet confrontations. Instead, she feels the weight of his cold stares from across the recovery ward, the way his jaw tightens when she enters a room he's in, the unmistakable message broadcast through every glance: you are temporary, you are replaceable, and I'm building the case to prove it. Her probationary status hangs over her like a surgical light, illuminating every move, every moment. The other nurses notice. They stop talking when she approaches the medication cart. The newer staff members, the ones still hungry to impress, begin documenting everything she does, crossing T's and dotting I's with the precision of people afraid she might contaminate their records. Nobody calls her by her name anymore. It's always hey, you, or a nod or silence. The dog tag chain remains broken in her locker, wrapped around a faded photograph of her late husband in his navy dress blues. She doesn't wear it. Not yet. Morning rounds arrive like every other morning. Danielle is restocking the supply cart on the recovery ward when the overhead page crackles through the speakers above her head, the ones that sound like they're announcing deaths in slow motion. Danny the disaster to the nurse's station. Danny the disaster to the nurse's station. The silence that follows is immediate and suffocating. 2 nurses exchange smirks. A nursing assistant covers her laugh with a cough. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, indifferent witnesses. Danielle's hands don't pause on the supply cart. She finishes positioning the last bag of saline, closes the drawer with a soft click, and walks toward the station. Each step is deliberate. Each breath measured. The pain along her left side, where the IED shrapnel still lives beneath her skin, flares with muscle memory of a different kind of exposure. Dr. Ashford leans against the main counter, chart in hand. His tie is silk, expensive, the kind that costs more than Danielle's rent. He doesn't look up until she's directly in front of him. When he does, his smile doesn't reach his eyes. The space between them is close enough that she smells the coffee on his breath, the expensive cologne that masks something underneath it. Something that reminds her of operating rooms and the particular fear that comes from watching someone you're supposed to trust systematically hide the truth. Your med count was short again. His voice carries. The floor staff hears every word. Third time this month, Danielle. That's concerning. She opens her mouth. The response sits there on her tongue. You're diverting post-operative fentanyl into a briefcase, and I watched you do it, and you know I watched you do it, and this is what you do when you can't control the truth, you manufacture a different one. But the words don't come. They stay locked, where they've been staying for 3 weeks. Perhaps hospital work requires more attention to detail than you can manage. He turns a page in the chart with deliberate slowness, still speaking loud enough for the incoming shift to hear. Some people are simply not cut out for the responsibility. The accountability. The trust we place in our staff. The word trust lands like a sucker punch. Danielle feels it in her chest, not fear, but something sharper. Something like recognition. He's good at this. Strategic. He's not just attacking her competence, he's suggesting instability, unreliability, the kind of character flaw that would make any hospital administration want her gone before she becomes a liability. She takes one measured breath. The kind they taught her in Marjah, when IED detection meant staying calm while your hands worked the minesweeper. When panic meant death. When the only option was to breathe and move and survive. A tear builds at the corner of her eye. Just one. She feels it coming like an incoming round, and she does what she's always done, she wipes it away before it falls. Before it registers on her face. Before it gives him the satisfaction. She meets his eyes directly. Doesn't blink. Doesn't look away. I've survived worse men than you, she says. Her voice comes out like still water, calm and deep and containing things he can't see. Much worse. The staff stops moving. The charge nurse's pen freezes above her clipboard. A nursing assistant actually stops breathing, it seems, caught between the two of them like a spectator at an execution. Ashford's expression doesn't change. His smile stays fixed in place. But something shifts in the space between them, a recognition, perhaps, that he's just heard something that doesn't fit the narrative he's constructing. A probationary nurse without family, without standing, without resources, should not sound like that. Should not speak with that particular kind of certainty. We'll discuss your future here in a formal meeting, he says finally. My office. Tomorrow. 0800 hours. The specificity of the time in military time, though he's never served, is a small knife twist. He knows what she is, at least partially. He's testing her. Trying to see if she flinches at the language. She doesn't. That afternoon, he doesn't corner her in the supply closet. Instead, by mid-shift, he approaches her with an audience. The charge nurse. The floor supervisor. The three of them converge on her near the medication dispensary, where she's verifying a narcotic count. His voice drops lower this time, which somehow makes it worse, makes the witnesses have to lean in, makes the humiliation more intimate. Danielle, we need to talk about your performance concerns. Your background check shows some gaps. Significant gaps. What exactly were you doing before nursing school? The question is designed to make her defensive. To make her explain. To make her fill the silence with information he can weaponize. She doesn't answer. She simply continues scanning the medication bottles, her movements precise and unhurried. The silence stretches between them like a hand around the throat. That's what I thought, Ashford continues. People who hide things usually have good reason. Usually have something to hide. The charge nurse shifts her weight, uncomfortable but complicit. The floor supervisor stares at a point somewhere past Danielle's left shoulder. Nobody defends her? Nobody says anything. By shift end, as the day crew begins to clear and the incoming night staff arrives through the main entrance, Ashford makes his final move. He positions himself in the parking lot near her car, flanked by the charge nurse and the floor supervisor. They're walking toward their cars, and he times it so they converge near her Honda Civic like wolves closing distance. Effective immediately, you're being moved to permanent night rotation, he announces. The day team needs more stability. More reliability. The kind of baseline performance that builds trust. The charge nurse avoids eye contact. A nursing assistant whispers something to her friend, her voice low but not low enough. Danielle hears the word unstable float past her ear like ash. Her jaw tightens. That's the only tell, the only moment her composure cracks, barely. She nods once, sharp and final, and turns away. Her boots, old, worn, broken in during a different lifetime, click against the asphalt. The sound is clear and distinct in the parking lot quiet. She reaches her car without looking back. Inside, with the doors closed and the silence pressing in, she grips the steering wheel until her knuckles go white. The plastic is cool under her palms. She can still feel the oil and dust of Marjah under her fingernails, even though she's washed her hands 1,000 times in 3 weeks. Some things don't come clean. She reaches into her jacket pocket and pulls out the dog tag chain. The chain is broken in 2 places, one from the IED blast, one from her own hands when they pulled her husband's body from the medical tent. The tags themselves are intact. She reads the name she already knows by heart. I failed you, she whispers to the metal and the silence and the empty parking lot. I promised to stay invisible. I promised to just be a nurse. And I couldn't even do that. The windshield fogs as she breathes. Outside, the afternoon sun is trying its best to break through the humidity that's been hanging over Raleigh for 3 days. Inside her car, it's dark as a bunker. She drives home in that darkness, one hand on the steering wheel, the other holding the broken chain like it might fly apart if she lets go. The radio plays something she doesn't listen to. The other drivers on the road seem to exist in a different world, a world where they haven't seen what she's seen, haven't survived what she's survived, aren't carrying the weight of secrets that could destroy a hospital if spoken aloud. That night, after working the parking lot shift that Ashford has reassigned her to, a punishment disguised as efficiency, moving her away from the recovery ward where she might see things she shouldn't, she drives to the cemetery instead of home. The rain starts somewhere around mile marker 7 on Interstate 40. By the time she reaches the gates, it's coming down in sheets, the kind of rain that sounds like applause against the windshield. She parks and walks to the grave without an umbrella. The rain soaks through her scrubs immediately, cold and heavy, and she doesn't care. Nobody does anymore. Nobody's watching. Nobody's keeping score of the way she falls apart when the world isn't looking. The headstone is granite and simple. No elaborate inscription, no religious sentiment. Just a name, 2 dates, and the inscription she chose, he came home. That was the blessing, the miracle, the thing the Pentagon said she should be grateful for while they medically discharged her at 34 with 1 lung and a permanent limp. She kneels in the mud. The rain hammers against her shoulders, her neck, her face. The broken dog tag chain is cold in her palm, cold as a body in a morgue, cold as the kind of certainty that comes from surviving something you weren't supposed to survive. I failed you, she says again. Her voice is swallowed by the rain and the thunder and the distance between here and Marjah and here and everywhere she was before this moment. I failed to stay invisible. I failed to be just a nurse. I failed to keep the promises I made. The rain runs down her face, mixing with whatever tears she's allowed herself in 3 weeks. The difference between rain and tears blurs. She doesn't know anymore which is which. I promised I wouldn't do this again, she continues. I promised I wouldn't see things. Wouldn't know things. Wouldn't be the thing that knows. But knowing is what she does. It's what she was built for. And Ashford, he knows that, at least partly. That's why he's trying so hard to erase her. That's why he needs her gone before the wrong person recognizes what she actually is. She stands finally, her knees soaked with rain and mud. She places the broken dog tag chain on the headstone, a weight to keep it from blowing away. A promise she might not keep. A prayer to a God she stopped believing in somewhere between Helmand Province and this parking lot. The drive home is silent. The radio stays off. The windshield wipers keep their rhythm, a heartbeat, a metronome, the sound of time passing whether she moves forward or stays still. The windshield wipers keep their rhythm, a heartbeat, a metronome, the sound of time passing whether she moves forward or stays still. By 11 p.m., Danielle is back at Sacred Heart, clocking in for the night shift she didn't request and can't refuse. The recovery ward is quiet. Most beds occupied by post-op patients still swimming upstream toward consciousness, their monitors beeping in soft syncopation. She moves through the hallway in her starched scrubs, a ghost moving through fluorescent light, when the first siren cuts the darkness outside. Then another. Then a third. The radios crackle. Ambulance incoming. Single patient. Collapsed lung. ETA for minutes. The night charge nurse, a woman named Melissa who has learned not to make eye contact with Danielle, calls out, "We need vitals prep in recovery 3. Who's?" She stops. "Danielle, you're on it." Just like that. A routine admission. Danielle's hands are already moving. She's been a nurse for 7 years, but her hands remember older work. She pulls the crash cart into position. Sets up the monitor leads. Runs through the mental checklist with the precision of someone who once checked weapons before dawn raids in Helmand Province. The difference is, nobody here knows what those hands have done. The ambulance arrives at 11:41 p.m. The paramedics push through the bay doors fast. Too fast. The patient is a man, broad-shouldered, military-bearing, even unconscious. Late 30s. Pale. Breathing laboured on the oxygen mask. Left side of his chest barely rising with each breath. The paramedic's voice is clipped. "Captain Luis Vega, 38, training accident, fell 20 feet from a rappel tower at Fort Bragg, left pneumothorax. We got him on high flow O2 but his decompensating, O2 sat dropping, started at 94, now 78. Danielle watches his face for exactly 1 second as they transfer him to the hospital bed. Recognition floods through her chest like ice water. Those high cheekbones. The small scar across his left temple. The way his unconscious body still holds itself like someone trained to survive. Smoke. It's smoke. Captain Luis Vega. Marjah, 2012. The phi-based defense that cost her half her lung. The man who carried her 300 meters under fire. The man who held her hand in a Kandahar field hospital and said, "You're going home, Atlas. You go home and you live, you understand? You live for both of us." Smoke had walked into a sniper's nest that day. Lost his right arm below the elbow to an IED fragment that should have taken his head. He'd been invalided home 18 months before she was. She thought she'd never see him again. Now he's drowning in his own blood and fluid and nobody in this hospital knows he's a warrior. They see a patient. They see a training accident. Danielle is in recovery 3 before the doctors arrive. Chest wall barely moving. O2 sat at 76 now. Pulse rising. The telltale signs of tension: pneumothorax, pressure collapsing his left lung, compromising cardiac filling. He's got maybe minutes before his blood pressure crashes. Cardiac arrest in a man who survived things that would have killed most people on the first day. Not here. Not tonight. Not on her watch. Her voice is steady. "I need a 14-gauge angiocath needle and a 20 cubic centimeter syringe. Now." Melissa doesn't move. The doctor. Needle. Syringe. Alcohol prep pad. There's something in Danielle's tone that makes Melissa reach for the crash cart without asking. The equipment is in her hands in 4 seconds. Danielle is already running an alcohol swab across Vega's chest wall, second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. Her fingers find the landmarks like she's reading a map she's memorized in another lifetime. Hands that held gauze over sucking chest wounds in the dark. Hands that splinted fractures with paracord and duct tape. Hands that know where to push. The needle slides in. There's a hiss, high-pitched, urgent, the sound of pressurized air escaping, and suddenly his chest wall drops slightly. The pressure releases. His oxygen sat ticks up. 79, 81. 83, the monitor rhythm steadies. His breathing deepens. She doesn't remove the needle. Instead, she pulls the MRE wrapper from her scrub pocket, the one she keeps there from habit, from a time when improvisation meant survival, tears it open, and fashions a makeshift flutter valve, sealing 3 sides against his chest wall, leaving one corner loose so air can escape but not re-enter. It's something she learned in a Quonset hut outside Marjah from a combat surgeon named Colonel Hayes who treated her like a soldier, not a patient. Grab the chest X-ray machine, Danielle says. We need to confirm placement before we move him. The code team is running in now. 3 residents. A chest surgeon she recognizes. They stop, seeing a probationary nurse standing over a patient with an improvised needle decompression and a food wrapper flutter valve that shouldn't work but absolutely is working because his O2 sat is climbing. 85, 88. 91, his heart rate dropping from the dangerous 142 to 110. The monitors showing sinus rhythm. A salvaged life. One of the residents looks like he's about to speak, but the surgeon just nods. Good work. Let's get him to the ICU. Her voice carries authority. Professional respect. Danielle steps back. She's done what she came to do. That's when she sees him. Dr. Ashford. Standing in the observation window. Watching. His jaw is clenched so tight she can see the muscle working from 20 feet away. His hands are gripped around a tablet. He saw everything. The improvised equipment. The military-grade procedure. The absolute confidence of someone who has done this before under far worse conditions. The mask isn't just slipping. It's shattered. He turns and walks away before the surgeon finishes writing orders. The ICU nurse takes the hand off. Danielle steps back into the hallway. Her scrubs are dry. Her breathing is controlled. The broken dog tag chain is cold against her collarbone beneath the fabric. Nobody in this hospital understands what just happened. They think they saw a nurse rise to an emergency. They didn't see the major stepping through a door she'd barricaded shut. But Ashford saw. He knows something now. Something that changes the calculation. 2 hours later, around 2 a.m., Danielle is pulling up Vega's chart on the nurse's station computer when the screen flashes red. Access denied. Attending physician override. She tries again. Same result. His chart is locked. Attending physician only. Which means Ashford has just personally removed her ability to see Vega's status, progress notes, or care plan. She closes her eyes. Breathes. The next moves are already calculating in her head like a chess game where she's 3 pieces down and the clock is running. The break room is empty at 2:19 a.m. except for cold coffee and the fluorescent hum. Danielle sits in the corner with a bottle of water, waiting for the day shift to start their 6 a.m. paperwork. She knows what's coming. Ashford will position himself. He'll tell the story first. He'll frame her actions as protocol violation, not heroism. He'll weaponize the very thing that just saved a life. At 4:33 a.m., she hears his voice in the hallway, talking to the incoming charge nurse. Nurse Ross performed an unauthorized procedure last night. Needle decompression without attending physician present. It violated protocol. We'll be documenting everything for the disciplinary hearing. A pause. She's a liability. I've already spoken to administration. They understand the liability issue. The charge nurse's response is too quiet to hear, but Danielle knows the response. They always are. A doctor's word carries weight that a probationary nurse's doesn't. At 6:17 a.m., as she's changing out of her scrubs, Ashford finds her in the locker room. His presence fills the space like pressure. He stands between her and the door. The hearing is Friday. 3 days. I've already documented your unauthorized procedure. I've also requested your immediate transfer to the satellite clinic in Durham. 2 hours away. While the hearing is ongoing. Danielle turns to face him. She doesn't move closer. She doesn't move away. Her hands are steady. Her breathing is steady. Her voice is a flat line. I saved his life. You violated protocol. There's a difference. He walks past her. His shoulder doesn't touch hers, but the air between them feels thin. She stands alone in the break room. Stands completely still. The fluorescent lights hum like electricity trapped in tubes. Outside, Raleigh is waking up. Cars moving. People beginning their days. Normal lives. Normal careers. Normal people who don't have to choose between their oath and their survival. That evening, rain begins. By the time she drives to Oakwood Cemetery, the sky has opened like a wound. The rain is relentless. Cold. The kind of rain that soaks through scrubs and into the places under your skin where the old injuries live. She parks. Walks through the mud in the dark. Her feet know the way. They've walked it enough times that her body could find it without vision. Row 7. Plot 14. The headstone reads, Michael James Ross, beloved husband. 1982 to 2019, no mention of the uniform. No mention of the classified work. No mention of the fact that he died carrying secrets in his chest cavity like shrapnel. She kneels in the mud. The broken dog tag chain is in her palm. Cold. The clasp broke the day she couldn't reach him in time. The day a gas line explosion took him from a coffee shop in Durham, and she was in surgery saving someone else's husband when the call came in. She couldn't save the one person who mattered. Water runs down her face. Rain or tears. She doesn't know anymore. The distinction stopped mattering 3 years ago. I promised you I'd stay invisible, she whispers to the headstone. Her voice is barely audible above the storm. I promised I'd keep my head down. I promised I wouldn't let the work follow me home. I failed you. The rain hammers harder. I failed myself. I can't even do this right. I just wanted to be invisible. Just one more nurse. Nobody special. Nobody dangerous. And I can't even manage that. Thunder rolls across Raleigh like incoming artillery. She stays until dawn. The morning light creeps through the hospital blinds like something reluctant. Danielle hasn't slept. She'd stood at Michael's grave until the rain stopped and the thunder rolled away toward the mountains, leaving only the smell of wet earth and the weight of things she couldn't change. By the time she drove back to Sacred Heart for her shift, her scrubs were still damp at the shoulders. She'd changed in the locker room without looking at her reflection. The call came at 7:43 a.m. Ashford's voice on the phone was calm, precise, the voice of a man whose plans were already in motion. I'm initiating your transfer to the Raleigh Satellite Clinic effective immediately. You'll receive the formal documentation by end of business. She didn't argue. She'd learned long ago that silence was sometimes the only response that didn't make things worse. But that wasn't the worst part. By 8:15 a.m., Ashford had made 3 calls to hospital administration. Not requests. Demands wrapped in professional language. Medical director, chief of surgery, legal affairs. In each call, he cited her unauthorized procedure on Captain Vega, the needle decompression, the improvised chest seal, as evidence of instability. Scope of practice violation. Reckless endangerment. A probationary nurse operating outside her credentials. The moves were surgical. Strategic. The kind of calculated decisions that came from someone who understood institutional leverage like a surgeon understands anatomy. By 8:42 a.m., Ashford personally walked to the recovery ward. His shoes clicked on the tile like a metronome counting down. He found her at the medication cart, pulling doses for the morning shift. His presence made the air in the hallway tighten. Her hands didn't shake. They never did. Nurse Ross, he said, his voice calm as a blade. Captain Vega's care is being reassigned effective immediately. You no longer have access to this wing. I've deactivated your credential card. She looked at him. Just looked. Her eyes were steady, the color of water held in a stone bowl. "You understand the scope of this," he continued. "You performed a procedure you weren't trained for. You endangered a patient. The disciplinary hearing is Friday at 9. Medical director, administrator, legal. I'd recommend you bring representation." She didn't respond. The silence between them held weight, like something solid. Ashford waited for a reaction, trembling, tears, desperate explanations. He'd watched her for weeks looking for a crack in the facade. Every demotion, every humiliation, every public insult had been designed to find the point where she'd break. But she didn't break. She never did. And that was the thing that infuriated him most. Her composure wasn't defiance. It was something worse. It was the calm of someone who'd already survived worse men than him. The realization flickered across his face for just a moment before he turned and left. The credential card failed when she tried to access the recovery ward 30 minutes later. The badge reader beeped red. Access denied. She'd known it was coming, but knowing and experiencing were different things. 2 other nurses watched from the hallway, their eyes careful not to make contact. The hospital grapevine ran fast. By lunch, everyone would know she'd been locked out. By dinner, they'd have decided she was unstable. By Friday morning at 8:24 a.m., Danielle sat in the main conference room on the 3rd floor. The table was long and polished, the kind of table that had witnessed hundreds of career endings. Ashford sat at one end, his file open, his expression arranged into something that resembled concern. The medical director sat to his left, a woman named Chen with silver-framed glasses and a pen positioned over a legal pad. Next to her was the hospital administrator, Patricia Holloway, who'd hired Danielle 14 months ago. To Holloway's right was hospital counsel, a man named Sterling who looked like he'd never smiled in his life. Ashford began speaking at exactly 9:02 a.m. "Thank you for convening this hearing," he said, his voice steady and professional. "I need to address a serious pattern of judgment errors by Nurse Ross that pose a direct threat to patient safety." He pulled out documentation with the precision of someone who'd prepared meticulously. 3 days ago, this nurse performed an emergency needle decompression on a patient without physician authorization, using improvised equipment, specifically, material from an MRE packet. This is outside her scope of practice as a registered nurse. The procedure violates hospital protocol, it violates state nursing board regulations, and it demonstrates a fundamental lack of judgment. He turned the file toward the administrator. Photographs. Images of Vega's chest with the improvised seal. Images of Danielle's hands holding the needle. Images that made it look like she'd been operating in chaos rather than saving a life. Additionally, Ashford continued, Nurse Ross has a documented pattern of behavioral instability. She's made inappropriate comments to medical staff. She's violated multiple protocol guidelines. She's demonstrated poor judgment that extends well beyond this single incident. I believe she represents a liability to this hospital. I'm recommending immediate termination and that her license be reported to the State Nursing Board for review. Chen wrote. Sterling nodded slightly. Holloway's face was carefully neutral. For patient safety, Ashford concluded, I recommend removal from all nursing duties, effective immediately. Silence. The kind of silence that moves like water through a room. Then the door opened. The wheelchair came through first. Luis Vega, still pale, still connected to a portable oxygen tank, but his eyes were sharp and focused. Behind him was his daughter, 12 years old, pushing the chair with the determined expression of someone who'd made a decision and committed to it. Vega's chest rose and fell against the oxygen tubing. His voice, when it came, was hoarse but audible. That's Atlas, he said. Not a question. A statement. An identification. That's Marjah Ross. The room froze. Ashford's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again without sound. Vega's daughter stepped forward, her voice clear and steady in a way that suggested she'd rehearsed this or prepared herself mentally for it. That's Marjah Ross. She saved my dad in Marjah. She saved him again 3 days ago. The administrator's hands trembled. Actually trembled. She reached toward her computer keyboard, her fingers moving like she wasn't entirely certain what she was doing. The file pulled up on her screen. Not the thin file from Ashford's personnel folder. The real file. The one with security clearances and medical discharge paperwork and documentation that had clearly been sealed. She read aloud, her voice shaking. Silver Star for gallantry in action. Pause. Breath. Her eyes moved across the screen. Bronze Star with V device. Another breath. Another Bronze Star. Purple Heart. The medical director leaned toward the screen. His jaw moved silently, reading text. When he spoke, his voice had changed entirely. Major Danielle Ross. United States Army Special Forces. Discharge status, medical. Reason, service-connected disability. The door opened again. This time, a figure in navy dress blues. Medals across his chest like a constellation. The kind of uniform that made ranking officers instinctively straighten. He walked to the conference table with the measured precision of someone operating under extreme discipline. When he spoke, his voice was formal, trained, the kind of voice that carried weight in rooms that mattered. Major Ross. He nodded once, a gesture of respect that carried significance. It's an honor. Ashford attempted to speak. That file wasn't. Major Danielle Ross, the SEAL continued, not acknowledging Ashford's voice, Special Forces, call sign Atlas. Decorated for the hostage extraction in Helmand Province where she held a defensive position for 4 hours against superior forces while wounded and under fire. The hallway had begun to fill. Nurses. Orderlies. The respiratory therapist who'd been walking past stopped and stood in the doorway. Everyone listening. The phi-based defense that resulted in her evacuation with critical injuries. Half her left lung compromised by fragmentation trauma. Her husband, Michael Ross, killed in the same attack. She received 2 Purple Hearts and a Silver Star while still in recovery, still medicated for pain, still grieving. Vega's voice came again, stronger now. She held my collapsed lung together with her bare hands in Marjah when we had no supplies. Combat medicine. What she did Tuesday night, that's exactly what I was trained to do. It saved my life. Twice. The daughter pulled out her phone. A photograph. Danielle and Lewis in desert camouflage, younger, both whole, both smiling at the camera with the specific look of people who'd survived something together. She showed it to the administrator, who stared at it like it was written in a language she didn't recognize. The SEAL continued methodically, as if reading from a formal record, Silver Star for rescuing a pinned unit under fire near Sanjin Valley. Bronze Star for infiltrating enemy territory to retrieve fallen soldiers. Purple Heart. Purple Heart again. Service-connected disability discharge at the rank of Major. Medical Evaluation Board determined her service had ended due to physical injury sustained in combat operations. A surgeon in the back of the crowd whispered something. Someone else exhaled audibly. Sterling, the hospital counsel, had stopped writing. His pen was suspended above his legal pad like he'd forgotten what words meant. Ashford attempted again, the procedure she performed, that wasn't within nursing scope. That procedure, the SEAL said, and his voice had taken on an edge that suggested he was exercising considerable restraint, is standard combat medicine for pneumothorax. Field expedient needle decompression using improvised chest seals. Major Ross was trained at Fort Bragg by the Special Forces Medical Unit. She taught that procedure. The room went so quiet you could hear the fluorescent lights humming their electric hum. Vega leaned forward slightly in his chair. His oxygen tubing caught the light. Ask him why he wanted her transferred before I woke up. Holloway turned to Ashford. Her expression had shifted. The careful neutrality had cracked. What showed underneath was something resembling shock mixed with understanding. Dr. Ashford, she said, and her voice had changed entirely. It had the particular tone of someone who'd just realized they'd been manipulated. Can you explain why you were requesting this nurse's transfer before the patient had regained consciousness? Ashford's face had drained of color. His mouth worked soundlessly, like someone operating in a vacuum where language had stopped existing. The SEAL saluted. Not casually. Formally. Hand to chest, the kind of salute that happened in courtrooms and medal ceremonies. Thank you for your service, Major. Danielle, sitting silently in her chair through all of this, simply nodded. Her hands were folded on the table in front of her. Her expression hadn't changed. But something in her eyes, something had shifted. The light in them had changed. It was the look of someone who'd been carrying a weight so long that they'd almost forgotten it was there, and now someone else had picked up half of it. That wasn't the worst part for Ashford, though. The worst part was what came next. The room went dead silent. The administrator's voice cut through like a scalpel. Dr. Ashford, what is Captain Vega referring to? Ashford stood. His chair scraped against the polished floor, a sound like metal on bone. This is absurd. I won't be questioned by. The SEAL stepped forward. One movement. Deliberate. Captain Vega regained consciousness Wednesday morning. He made a phone call to his former unit. They made some calls of their own. The medical director scrolled through something on his laptop. His face drained of color like someone pulling a plug. Richard, there's an investigation flagged on your DEA license. Ashford's voice rose an octave. That's privileged information. You can't, but he was already moving toward the door, his briefcase clutched like a shield that wouldn't hold. The SEAL didn't move. Didn't raise his voice. Sit down, Doctor. Not a request. It was a command spoken the way a sniper gives coordinates, soft, absolute, impossible to refuse. The door opened again. 2 hospital security officers entered, their presence filling the room like a pressure change before a storm. The administrator stood. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. Dr. Ashford, you're suspended pending investigation. Security will escort you out. Ashford's face flushed crimson. The trembling wasn't fear. It was rage meeting ruin. This is a setup. You're going to believe some burnt-out combat nurse over a physician with 15 years, he stopped. Looked at Danielle. She was standing now, meeting his eyes with that same quiet calm from the parking lot, from the supply closet 3 weeks earlier when he'd cornered her in the dark between the shelves. One measured breath. She didn't say a word. But the room heard it anyway. That breath was a statement. That breath was the sound of a warrior who'd already survived worse than losing a job. Ashford left escorted by security, his shoes clicking against tile like a countdown. That evening, he appeared on WIL News 5 6 o'clock broadcast, his tie loosened, his voice agitated like a man running out of time. The veteran community is weaponizing sympathy to attack qualified medical professionals. Nurse Ross is clearly suffering from PTSD and should not be working in patient care. She's mentally unstable, dangerous even, the news anchor's earpiece crackled. Her hand moved to it. Her eyes widened. Dr. Ashford, we're receiving a call. It's Lieutenant General Morrison from Fort Bragg. Ashford's mouth opened like he was going to object. Too late. The line connected live. 2 million viewers across North Carolina heard the general's voice, calm, measured, the kind of composure that comes from having already survived the worst. I'm watching your broadcast, Doctor. I'm also looking at evidence compiled by Major Ross's former unit regarding your diversion of controlled substances from Sacred Heart Hospital over the past 8 months. Fentanyl. Hydromorphone. Morphine sulfate. The DA received the full report this morning. Ashford's face on split screen went white. Absolutely white, the color of someone watching their entire future collapse in real time. The anchor stammered, General, are you saying? I'm saying Dr. Ashford attempted to transfer and silence the one person who witnessed his criminal activity. The investigation is ongoing. Major Ross not only saved Captain Vega's life, she documented everything. Her testimony is why we're speaking right now. The camera held on Ashford's frozen face. His jaw moved soundlessly. The broadcast didn't cut away. America saw his ruin in high definition. The phones at the DEA rang for 3 hours straight. The phones at the hospital's legal department rang for 6. By morning, the story had spread from Raleigh to Charlotte to Atlanta. Decorated nurse exposes doctor's drug diversion scheme. Special Forces major hidden at Raleigh Hospital. General calls out criminal conduct on live television. The headlines kept multiplying like wounds that wouldn't clot. Ashford's medical license went inactive by Wednesday. Criminal charges were filed by Friday. The supplemental insurance job came by Monday, the only work willing to take him after what happened. 6 months later, Danielle walked through the parking lot of a strip mall on Highway 70, the afternoon sun hammering down like an indictment. She was in dress uniform. The medals earned in Marjah gleamed on her chest: Bronze Star, Silver Star, each one a specific weight and specific meaning. The dog tag chain, finally repaired, hung visible at her collar. Both tags now. His and hers. Reunited. She passed a folding table with a handwritten sign: Supplemental Insurance, Low Rates. Dr. Richard Ashford sat behind it in shirt sleeves, his face lined with exhaustion, his eyes tracking the people walking past who didn't look at him. He saw her. His mouth tightened. He looked down at his paperwork, pamphlets about life insurance, about coverage nobody wanted from someone nobody trusted. She didn't stop walking. The new VA hospital in Raleigh occupied 15 acres on the eastern side of the city. Its architecture was all clean lines and glass, a building designed to heal. Danielle stood on the platform for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, wearing her dress uniform with the medals polished until they reflected the morning light like small fires. Louis Vega stood beside her in uniform, his daughter between them. The administrator from Sacred Heart was there. She'd hired Danielle as director of emergency medicine the week after the hearing, the moment it became clear that Ashford would be facing charges. That decision had cost the hospital nothing. It had cost Ashford everything. The general who'd called into the news broadcast, Lieutenant General Morrison, 82nd Airborne Division, handed Danielle the ceremonial scissors. His handshake was firm. His eyes held the kind of respect that transcends rank. Major Ross represents what this facility stands for: warriors who continue to serve, even after the uniform comes off. She cut the ribbon. Cameras flashed. Journalists shouted questions. Major Ross, how does it feel? She didn't answer them. She looked at Vega. His daughter hugged her. That was the answer. That was everything. That evening, in her office at the VA hospital, Danielle sat at a desk with her name on a placard: Major Danielle Ross, Emergency Medicine Director. The late sun came through the window in golden bars. She opened the box she'd kept locked since her medical discharge 6 years ago. Her husband's flag, carefully folded into a triangle that military families recognize as the shape of impossible sacrifice. Her medals, polished. And a letter he'd written her before Marjah, the ink slightly faded, the envelope worn from being opened and reread on nights when invisible seemed like the only option that wouldn't hurt people she cared about. If I don't make it back, promise me you'll keep fighting. Not with guns, with everything else you are. Promise me. She'd kept that promise. Not to him. To herself. But keeping promises to yourself is what keeps you alive. She touched the dog tag chain at her throat, both tags now, his stamped in 2007, hers stamped in 2008, the years of service that meant they'd been together in that war, in that place where she'd learned that sometimes heroism looks like standing still in the rain and sometimes it looks like walking toward someone who wants to destroy you and not flinching. A knock on her door frame. Louis appeared, his daughter with him. The girl was holding something small, a piece of paper. You saved me twice, Atlas. We wanted to say thank you. The daughter stepped forward, shy now, and pressed the paper into Danielle's hand. A drawing. Crayon on white paper. 2 figures in green. A helicopter. Stars. At the bottom in careful print, Major Ross saved my daddy." Danielle knelt to the girl's eye level. "Your daddy is a SEAL. He saved himself. I just helped." The girl shook her head. "He said you always save people. Even when people don't know you're a hero." Outside the window, the lights of Raleigh glowed in the darkness. The city sprawled in all directions, hospitals, schools, homes, lives being lived in the ordinary way, with the ordinary assumption that the people around them don't carry shrapnel scars or broken dog tag chains, or the specific kind of silence that comes from having already survived the worst. Danielle looked at her reflection in the glass, no longer hiding, no longer invisible, no longer someone who could be diminished by a man willing to do anything to protect his own secrets. The reflection looked back. A nurse. A major. A survivor. A person who'd learned that sometimes the bravest warriors carry stethoscopes instead of guns, and sometimes the world needs them to carry both. The stethoscope hung draped over the medals. The medals caught the light. And the light made everything else disappear except what had always been there, the truth that had taken 6 months and a 3-star general and 2 million television viewers to finally, absolutely clear. If you ever find yourself facing someone who wants to silence you, remember this: the people worth saving are always worth the fight. Subscribe for more stories about the heroes nobody sees until it's too late. Like and comment if you've ever been underestimated by someone who didn't know your full story. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the only one strong enough to change everything.